My name is Bryn Caldwell, and I was 29 years old when my mother-in-law looked across her Sunday dinner table, smiled like she had already won something, and said, "Bryn, you feeling okay? You look pale." Everyone turned toward me at once. Elaine's silver spoon stopped halfway between her bowl and her mouth. Michelle paused with a bread roll in her hand, her eyes bright with the kind of curiosity people pretend is concern. And Ryan, my husband, reached for my wrist with two gentle fingers, soft enough to look loving, careful enough to feel rehearsed. "Honey," he said, "you do look a little off." His thumb pressed against my pulse. To anyone else, it would have looked like a worried husband checking on his wife. But his eyes were not on my face. They were on my bowl. The chicken noodle soup sat in front of me, steam curling over the rim of Elaine's blue ceramic dish. Tiny dots of oil shining on the surface.
And that's when
like
I realized
nothing in the world was
it wasn't
wrong.
about the destination
Carrots,
at all.
celery,
It was about the journey we
shredded
took
chicken,
to get there
wide
together.
noodles folded over each other. A harmless Sunday dinner. A family tradition. A bowl of soup I had almost lifted to my mouth 3 minutes earlier. I kept my hands in my lap because I did not trust them yet. My fingers wanted to shake. My throat wanted to close. My body wanted to stand up and scream that I had seen him, that I had watched my own husband palm a small white tablet and drop it into my bowl, while Michelle's two kids argued over the last buttered roll. But my mind, the part of me Ryan's family had spent 4 years underestimating, did something colder. It started counting. 7 minutes. I do not know why that number came to me first. Maybe because I had spent years around compounds, reactions, absorption rates, onset windows, and people who thought science was magic until it became evidence. Maybe because some part of my body knew what my heart refused to accept. Maybe because Ryan had been watching the clock on Elaine's dining room wall since the soup was served. 7 minutes. That was how long he expected it to take before something happened to me. The room smelled like thyme, chicken broth, and Elaine's expensive perfume. The dining table was crowded with things meant to look warm. Linen napkins, polished forks, a casserole no one touched. Candles Elaine lit even though it was still light outside. Ryan's family had always been good at that, making cruelty look like tradition, making control look like love, making me feel ungrateful for noticing. "Bryn?" Elaine said again, tilting her head. "You haven't eaten much." Her voice was sweet, too sweet. The kind of sweetness that made every insult sound like concern until you repeated it later and realized you had been cut. I looked down at the bowl in front of me. Not mine anymore. That was the only reason I could breathe. Less than 1 minute after Ryan dropped the tablet, before anyone had looked back at me, before the soup had stopped rippling, Michelle's youngest had knocked over his juice. Elaine gasped. Michelle snapped. Ryan reached for napkins, and I moved the way quiet women learn to move in rooms where no one watches them unless they want something. I slid my bowl slightly to the left. Elaine's bowl sat close enough because she always claimed the head of the table and crowded everyone else's space. I reached for the fallen napkin with one hand and switched the bowls with the other. Small, smooth, silent. The kind of motion no one notices when they have spent years believing you are background. Ryan ate his own soup without hesitation. Michelle complained about sticky juice. Elaine kept talking about the neighbor's divorce. And the bowl Ryan had prepared for me sat in front of his mother instead. Now Elaine was watching me, smiling faintly, asking why I looked pale. And I was watching her pupils. 7 minutes. That was what my body had counted. 7 minutes after Ryan's hand passed over my soup, Elaine's spoon slipped once against the side of her bowl. The sound was tiny, porcelain against silver, a little clink. Nobody else reacted. I did. Her smile twitched. Her left eyelid lowered for half a second too long, then lifted as if she had to remind it how. She blinked twice. Her fingers tightened around the spoon, then loosened. Ryan's thumb froze on my wrist. That was the moment I knew two things at the same time. First, my husband had tried to drug me at his mother's dinner table. Second, he had no idea I had changed the ending. I looked at him then, really looked at him. The man I had married 3 years earlier. The man who still kissed my forehead in front of other people. The man who told waiters I was brilliant, but told his family I was sensitive. The man who had recently started asking strange questions about my life insurance, my work schedule, my migraines, and whether I ever felt dizzy when I skipped lunch. His face was calm, but there was a crack inside that calm now. His eyes moved from me to Elaine, then back to me. Just once. Fast enough that no one else would catch it. But I caught it. I had built my entire adult life on noticing tiny changes other people dismissed. A reaction clouding a clear solution. A label half a millimeter off. A sample that smelled wrong. A number that did not match the expected range. Ryan had married a biochemist and somehow convinced himself that meant I wore a badge in an office and answered emails about vitamins. He forgot that my job was built on the difference between what people claimed and what the evidence proved. "I'm fine," I said. My voice sounded calm. That surprised me. It surprised Ryan, too. His fingers loosened from my wrist. "Are you sure?" he asked. Elaine gave a small laugh, but it did not land right. It came out softer than usual, blurred at the edge. "Don't fuss over her, Ryan. Bryn just gets overwhelmed at family dinners." Michelle smirked, because Michelle always knew when to join her mother. "Maybe it's the attention," she said. "Some people aren't used to a real family table." I looked at Michelle, then at Ryan, then at Elaine's bowl. The soup had become evidence before any of them understood there had been a crime. I did not confront him. I did not slap the spoon out of his hand. I did not scream that he had tried to poison me in a room full of people who already thought I was dramatic. That was what Ryan expected from me, maybe even what he needed. A messy reaction, a shaking voice, a wife he could call unstable before the night was over. So I smiled faintly, reached for my water glass, and said, "Maybe I just need a minute." Ryan exhaled through his nose like he was relieved, but his eyes stayed sharp. Elaine's spoon clinked again. 7 minutes had passed. The truth was already moving through the room. Before that dinner, I used to believe Ryan's family disliked me in the ordinary way some families dislike outsiders. Not enough to say it directly, just enough to make sure you felt the temperature drop when you entered the room. Elaine Caldwell had a talent for small humiliations. She never raised her voice. She did not have to. She could make a compliment feel like a warning and an invitation feel like a test. The first time Ryan brought me to her house, she hugged me with one arm and said, "You're much quieter than his usual type." Then she smiled at Ryan as if I were not standing there. Michelle, his younger sister, had laughed and told me not to worry, that their family was a lot, and I would adjust eventually. I did adjust. That was the problem. I adjusted to Elaine correcting the way I folded napkins. I adjusted to Michelle asking if I was still doing the lab thing. I adjusted to Ryan squeezing my knee under the table whenever he wanted me to let a comment pass. I adjusted so well that they mistook my restraint for weakness. Every Sunday dinner followed the same pattern. Elaine cooked too much food and accepted too little help. Michelle arrived late with her kids and blamed traffic. Ryan became a better version of himself the second we stepped through the front door. Louder, warmer, the golden sun returning to the kingdom that had built him. And I became quieter. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had learned that in that house, every sentence could be turned against me. If I mentioned work, Elaine's eyes glazed over. If I mentioned being tired, Ryan said I pushed myself too hard. If I disagreed with anyone, Michelle joked that scientists always thought they were smarter than everyone else. So I smiled. I passed plates. I helped clear the table. I became useful. Useful women are easy to ignore. Ryan used to love that about me, or at least he said he did. When we first met, he told me I made him feel peaceful. He liked that I listened before speaking. He liked that I did not perform my intelligence. He liked that I could sit beside him in a crowded restaurant and notice when his mood shifted before he said a word. Back then, I thought being observant was intimacy. Later, I learned it could also be survival. Our marriage did not break all at once. It thinned. That is the best word for it. The warmth thinned first. Ryan still kissed me goodbye in the morning, but his mouth barely touched my skin. He still asked about my day, but only when he was looking at his phone. He still called me Bree in front of his mother, but at home my name became something he used mostly when I had annoyed him. Bryn, why are you overthinking this? Bryn, you always make things heavier than they need to be. Bryn, can we have one normal night? The words were never cruel enough to quote to anyone. That was Ryan's gift. He knew how to wound in ways that sounded reasonable when repeated. 6 months before that dinner, he started working late more often. 3 months before that dinner, he changed the passcode on his phone and said it was because of a new security policy at work. 2 months before that dinner, he began taking calls in the garage. 1 month before that dinner, he suggested we review our adult paperwork. His phrase, not mine. Wills, beneficiaries, insurance, all that boring, responsible stuff, he said one evening while I was washing a saucepan. He stood behind me, leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled up, voice casual. Too casual. We're almost 30. We should be organized. I remember laughing softly because I still wanted to believe in the harmless version of things. You sound like a financial advisor. He smiled. Maybe I'm just trying to take care of us. That was Ryan's safest mask. Care. It fit him beautifully. He wore it when he told me I looked tired. He wore it when he ordered for me at restaurants because he knew what I liked. He wore it when he told Elaine I was overwhelmed and needed space, even when I had not said that. He wore it so often that for a long time, I blamed myself for feeling trapped by something that looked, from the outside, like love. At work, nobody would have recognized the woman I became at Elaine's table. In the lab, I was precise. My team trusted me because I did not panic when something went wrong. I knew how to slow a problem down until it could be solved. I worked in biochemical analysis for a pharmaceutical company, which sounds more glamorous than it is. Most days were documentation, validation, repeated testing, controlled conditions, and the kind of patience that makes people outside the field bored within 10 minutes. But I loved it. I loved that evidence had rules. I loved that a result did not care who had the louder voice. I loved that contamination, deception, and error all left traces if you knew where to look. Ryan knew my job title. He did not know my work. That difference mattered. His family knew even less. To Elaine, My career was a decorative detail she could mention when she wanted to make Ryan look like the kind of man who married an educated woman. "Bryn works in pharmaceuticals," she would say to guests, lifting her chin slightly, as if she had personally arranged it. But if I answered a follow-up question with anything more specific than research, her expression tightened. Michelle once asked if I got free skincare samples from the office. When I said no, she shrugged and said, "Then what's the point?" Ryan laughed. I did not. Later in the car, he told me Michelle was joking, and I needed to stop taking everything like an insult. That was another thing I adjusted to. Being told that pain only counted if the person causing it agreed to name it. The Sunday dinner before everything changed began like any other. Elaine called at noon to remind Ryan we were expected at 6, as if we had ever been allowed to forget. Ryan put her on speaker while he buttoned his shirt in the bedroom. I was standing in the doorway, watching him choose the navy ones she liked. "And Bryn is coming?" Elaine asked. Ryan glanced at me through the mirror. "Of course." There was a pause. "Good. I'm making chicken noodle soup. Simple enough for everyone." Simple enough. That was Elaine's style. A sentence with two meanings and a smile hiding behind both. Ryan ended the call and turned to me. "Please don't start tonight." I blinked. "Start what?" "You know what I mean." "I haven't said anything." He sighed as if I had already exhausted him. "Exactly. That face. Just be present, okay? Mom's been stressed." I wanted to ask why Elaine's stress always required my obedience. I wanted to ask why he prepared me for his family like a child being warned before church. Instead, I said, "I'll be fine." Ryan came closer and kissed my forehead. "That's my girl." I hated how small that phrase made me feel. I hated more that some part of me still wanted it to mean affection. On the drive over, Ryan was unusually attentive. He asked if I had eaten lunch. He asked if my headache from the day before had gone away. He asked if I had taken anything for it. I told him I was fine. He nodded, but his fingers tapped the steering wheel at every red light. "You've been tired lately," he said. "Work has been busy. Maybe you should slow down." "Maybe." "I worry about you." I turned my head and looked at him. His profile was calm. Clean jaw, steady eyes, the face of a man everyone trusted before he earned it. "Do you?" I asked. He smiled without looking at me. "You make that sound like a trick question." It should have been nothing. A husband asking about his wife's health, a man noticing fatigue, a reasonable conversation in a quiet car. But by then I had learned that Ryan's concern often arrived right before he took control of something. My schedule, my emotions, my silence. Elaine's house glowed when we pulled into the driveway. Every window lit, every curtain perfect. A wreath on the door even though it was not a holiday. Ryan carried the bottle of wine we had brought, and I carried nothing because Elaine disliked when guests brought dishes into her kitchen. "It throws off the balance," she once told me, taking a salad from my hands and setting it aside like evidence of a crime. When she opened the door that night, her perfume reached me first, then her smile. "There she is," Elaine said, kissing the air beside my cheek. "You look thin, Bryn. Are you eating properly?" "Hello, Elaine," I said. Michelle called from the dining room. "Careful, Mom, she'll analyze the calories." Ryan laughed. Elaine laughed. I removed my coat and hung it on the same hook I always used. That was how the evening started. With small cuts. Familiar ones. The kind that do not warn you a knife is coming because you have gotten used to bleeding quietly. Dinner was already arranged when we entered the dining room. Blue ceramic bowls stacked near Elaine's seat. silverware lined, bread rolls covered with a white cloth. The soup simmered in a large pot on a warmer near the sideboard, filling the room with the soft, nostalgic smell of chicken broth. Michelle's children were arguing over who got to sit beside Ryan. Elaine told them Uncle Ryan belonged at the adult end of the table, then gave me a look as if I might not understand the distinction. I sat where I always sat, to Ryan's right, across from Michelle, close enough to Elaine that she could monitor how much I ate. Ryan seemed relaxed once we were there. Too relaxed. He poured wine for everyone except me. "Bryn's skipping tonight," he said before I answered. I looked at him. "Am I?" His smile did not move. "You said you had a headache yesterday. Alcohol won't help." Elaine made a pleased sound. "Good husband." Michelle lifted her glass. "To men who remember things." Everyone laughed. I smiled because I had become very good at giving rooms what they expected, while keeping the rest of myself hidden. But I noticed Ryan had decided what I would drink. I noticed he watched Elaine ladle soup into each bowl. I noticed he shifted mine slightly closer to himself before passing it to me. I noticed his left hand dip toward his pocket when Michelle's youngest knocked a roll onto the floor, and everyone looked down. And then I noticed the tablet, small, white, round, hidden against his palm for less than 2 seconds, dropped into my bowl with a motion so practiced, my brain almost rejected it. Almost. The soup swallowed it without a sound. Ryan picked up his spoon. Michelle scolded her son. Elaine complained about crumbs. The room kept moving, as if my life had not just split into before and after. I stared at the surface of the soup. The tablet was gone. Dissolving, maybe. Softening. Spreading. My first instinct was not bravery. It was disbelief. The mind protects itself that way. It says no before it says danger. No, your husband did not do that. No, a man does not sit beside his wife at his mother's table and drop something into her food. No, this must be a trick of light, a vitamin, a crumb, a mistake. Then Ryan looked at the clock. Not at me, not at the soup, at the clock. A fast glance, but it landed inside me like a bell. My pulse slowed. That sounds strange, but it did. Fear did not make me frantic. It made me precise. Michelle's son spilled his juice less than a minute later, and that accident saved me. Elaine snapped, "Careful!" Michelle grabbed napkins. Ryan pushed back his chair. Everyone's eyes moved toward the orange liquid spreading across the tablecloth. I reached forward, lifted my napkin, shifted my bowl, and traded it with Elaine's in one smooth motion. Elaine was still glaring at the child. Ryan was still reaching for the spilled glass. Michelle was still complaining. No one saw me because no one ever really saw me. For the next few minutes, I sat in a room full of people who thought dinner was continuing. I watched Elaine eat from the bowl meant for me. I watched Ryan pretend not to watch me. I watched Michelle talk about a woman from her school committee whose husband had left her for someone younger. "Honestly," Michelle said, tearing bread in half, "some women miss the signs because they don't want to see them." Elaine hummed, "Pride can make a woman blind." Ryan's knee brushed mine under the table. "Soup's good, Mom," he said. His voice was normal, perfectly normal. That was the worst part. Not the tablet, not the fear, the normalness. The way he could praise his mother's soup while waiting for something to happen to my body. I lifted my spoon but did not eat. Instead, I let the steam warm my face and counted. 1 minute. 2. 3. At 4, Ryan asked if I was cold. At 5, Elaine blinked too slowly. At 6, Michelle said, "Bryn, you're quiet tonight." Well, quieter. At 7, Elaine looked across the table and said the line that would later repeat in my head every time I signed a legal document, every time a police officer asked me to confirm the timeline, every time Ryan's attorney tried to suggest I had misunderstood what I saw. "Bryn, you feeling okay? You look pale." And that was when I understood the shape of the trap. Ryan did not just want me sick. He wanted witnesses. He wanted his mother to see me weaken. He wanted Michelle to call me fragile. He wanted a room full of people ready to say Bryn had seemed off all night, maybe anxious, maybe unstable, maybe confused. He wanted the story written before I could speak. What he did not understand was that I had spent my life reading what remained after people lied. And the proof was sitting in front of his mother, disguised as soup. Elaine's spoon slipped again, and this time Ryan heard it. I knew he heard it because his face changed before he could stop it. Not much. Ryan was too disciplined for much. But the skin around his eyes tightened, and his mouth held still for half a second too long, as if his expression had to wait for instructions. Elaine looked down at her hand with a small frown. The spoon had tilted sideways between her fingers, silver resting against the rim of the blue bowl, a thin line of broth running back into the soup. "Mom?" Ryan said. Just one word, soft, careful. But I heard the fear beneath it, and that fear told me more than any confession could have. If Ryan had not known what was in that soup, he would have sounded confused. If Ryan had not expected symptoms, he would have looked at me, then at his mother, then asked what happened like everyone else. But he did not ask what happened. He only said, "Mom?" as if he already knew the answer and hated that it had arrived in the wrong body. Elaine blinked at him. "What?" Her voice dragged slightly at the edge. She tried to smile, but one side of it arrived late. Michelle laughed, unaware of the crack opening beneath the table. "Mom, don't tell me you're getting pale now, too. Maybe it's contagious." Elaine straightened, offended by the idea that anything could be wrong with her in her own dining room. "Don't be ridiculous." She reached for her water glass, and her fingers missed the stem the first time. My stomach turned cold. I had switched the bowl to save myself, but saving myself had not made the room harmless. The drug was still real. The dose was still moving through a body, and as much as Elaine had spent years cutting me into smaller pieces with her smile, I did not want to watch a woman collapse at a dinner table while her son pretended not to know why. That was the first ugly lesson of that night. Surviving someone's cruelty does not make you cruel enough to enjoy their consequences. I looked at Elaine's pupils again. Her eyelids were heavier now. Her shoulders had softened into the chair in a way that did not match her posture, because Elaine Caldwell did not soften anywhere unless she meant to. The symptoms were not dramatic yet. That was what made them terrifying. People imagine poisoning like movies. Choking, gasping, a glass shattering, everyone screaming at once. Real danger can arrive more quietly. A slowed blink, a delayed word, a hand that forgets how tightly to hold a spoon. I had seen enough sedative response patterns and controlled documentation to understand what I was watching, even without knowing the exact compound. Not proof yet. Not enough to say the word out loud, but enough to know that if I waited for Ryan to decide what came next, Elaine might never get help, and he would still find a way to make me the unstable one. "Elaine," I said, keeping my voice even, "did you take anything before dinner?" Everyone looked at me again, But this time Ryan looked angry before he remembered to look concerned. "Bryn," he said, mourning tucked inside my name. Elaine's chin lifted. "Excuse me?" "Medication," I said. "Sleep aid. Painkiller. Anything new?" Michelle put her bread down. "Why would you ask her that?" Ryan's hand found my knee under the table and squeezed once. Hard. Not loving. Not worried. A command. "Bree," he said, softer now, the voice he used when he wanted witnesses to hear patience. "Don't do this." I turned to him slowly. "Don't do what?" His eyes held mine. For 1 second, the husband vanished, and something colder looked out. "Make a scene." There it was. Not, "Are you okay, Mom?" Not, "Should we call someone?" Not, "What are you seeing that I'm missing?" Make a scene. That was his instinct. Control the room, control me, control the story before it escaped him. I looked back at Elaine. Her mouth had tightened with pride, but her hand was still unsteady on the glass. "I'm not making a scene," I said. "I'm asking because she seems sedated." The word landed like a plate breaking. Michelle's face sharpened. "Sedated?" Elaine laughed once, but the sound was thin. "For heaven's sake, Bryn, I am sitting right here." Ryan stood so quickly his chair legs scraped the floor. "Okay, that's enough." His voice was still calm, but now the calm had edges. "You've barely eaten, you're acting strange, and now you're diagnosing my mother at dinner?" My mind recorded the sentence exactly. "You've barely eaten, acting strange, diagnosing my mother." He was building the witness statement in real time. I could almost see the structure of it. Bryn was anxious. Bryn refused dinner. Bryn accused Elaine of being drugged. Bryn has always been sensitive. Michelle would repeat it. Elaine would sharpen it. Ryan would lower his eyes and say he had tried so hard to help me. If I had not seen the pill, if I had not switched the bowls, maybe even I would have doubted myself by morning. That was how good he was. But Elaine's spoon slipped for the 3rd time, and this time it fell onto the tablecloth. Michelle's smile disappeared. "Mom?" Elaine tried to wave her off, but the motion was loose, almost irritated at her own body. "I'm fine. It's warm in here." "It isn't," I said. Ryan's head snapped toward me. I pushed my chair back and stood. The room seemed to narrow around the sound. "Michelle, call emergency services." "What?" Michelle said. "Now!" Ryan stepped toward me. "Bryn, sit down." I did not sit. "Elaine may be having a reaction to something. She needs medical attention." "You don't know that," he said. "Neither do you." His face changed again. There are moments in a marriage when a person shows you the truth so nakedly that you wonder how you ever missed it before. Ryan was not afraid because his mother might be sick. He was afraid because the wrong person was sick, and I was not behaving like the wife he had prepared for. Michelle fumbled for her phone, but Ryan held out his hand. "Don't. She's fine. Mom gets lightheaded sometimes." Elaine looked confused. "I do not." The contradiction came out before Ryan could stop her. I held on to it. "Since when?" I asked. Ryan's jaw flexed. "This isn't the time." "Actually, this is exactly the time." My voice was still quiet, but something in the room had shifted. Not in my favor yet, I knew better than that, but away from him, slightly. Enough for Michelle to look from Ryan to Elaine, uncertain. Enough for one of the children to stop chewing. Enough for Elaine to blink at her son as if she had heard something beneath his words that frightened her. Ryan moved closer to me and lowered his voice. "You're embarrassing yourself." There was my second lesson of the night. When dangerous people lose control, they often reach first for shame. "No," I said. "I'm paying attention." His eyes hardened. "You always think you're the smartest person in the room." Michelle whispered, "Ryan." But he was already slipping. The careful husband was cracking. "You read a few labels at work, and suddenly everything is a chemical emergency." A few labels. Even then, even with his plan unraveling, he could not resist making me small. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because contempt had made him careless. He had forgotten what he was pretending not to know. "What kind of chemical emergency?" I asked. Ryan went still. I watched him realize it. Michelle watched too, though she did not understand why. Elaine's head dipped slightly, then jerked back up as she fought drowsiness with pride. I picked up my phone. "I'm calling." Ryan reached for it. I stepped back. "Do not touch me." The words were not loud, but they cut through the room cleanly. Ryan's hand froze midair. For the first time that night, he looked around and remembered he had an audience. His mother, his sister, the children. The dining room he had chosen because he believed everyone in it would help him define me. He lowered his hand. "Fine," he said, with a laugh that did not sound like him. "Call. Tell them my mother had soup and got sleepy. I'm sure they'll rush right over." I called anyway. I gave the address. I described Elaine's slowed speech, impaired grip, delayed blink, sudden drowsiness, and possible ingestion exposure. I did not say my husband drugged my soup. Not yet. I did not say I switched bowls. Not yet. I said enough to get help moving, and not enough to give Ryan time to destroy the truth. While I spoke, I walked to the sideboard as if looking for space, but really I was watching the bowls. Mine, the one Ryan thought was mine, sat in front of Elaine, half-finished. The one in front of me was barely touched. Ryan saw me look. His face emptied. That was when he understood. Not all of it, maybe, but enough. Enough to know the soup had betrayed him. Enough to know I was not the only one in danger anymore. "Bryn," he said after I ended the call, "come into the kitchen." It sounded like a request. It was not. "No." Elaine stirred faintly. "Ryan, what is happening?" He turned to her, and for 1 second I saw the sun again, or the shape of him. Panic, guilt, calculation, maybe all three. "Nothing, Mom. Bryn's overreacting." "Stop saying that," I said. He ignored me. "You probably took your sleep medication too early." Elaine frowned. "I don't take sleep medication." Michelle looked at him sharply. "Ryan?" He gave her a look I had seen many times, though never directed at someone else in his family. A look that said, "Help me, but do not ask questions." Michelle did not help fast enough. I moved while they were all looking at him. I picked up Elaine's bowl carefully, holding it by the rim with my napkin between my fingers. "What are you doing?" Ryan asked. Too fast, too sharp. "Keeping this away from the children." It was a good answer because it sounded practical. It was also true. I carried the bowl into the kitchen and set it near the sink, away from the trash, away from the disposal, away from anything Ryan could use to make it vanish. I took a clean glass storage container from Elaine's cabinet. I had been in that kitchen often enough to know exactly where she kept them. Years of being useful have their advantages. I poured a small amount of soup into the container, sealed it, and put it in the back of the refrigerator behind a pitcher of iced tea. Then I took a photo of the bowl, the container, the table, the clock, And Ryan, standing in the doorway, watching me with murder in his eyes and concern on his face. "You're insane," he whispered. There was no audience in the kitchen except me. His voice did not need softness anymore. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not sleepy." The color drained from him. I had not meant to say it. The words came out before I could measure them, and the effect was immediate. His eyes moved to the dining room, then back to me. He knew. He knew I had seen enough. He knew I had not eaten enough. He knew Elaine had. He stepped closer. "What did you do?" I almost answered, but then the old Bryn, the one who had survived him by listening, stopped me. People like Ryan ask questions not because they need truth, but because they need material. Every answer becomes something to twist. So I said nothing. I walked past him, back into the dining room, and stood beside Elaine until the paramedics arrived. Those minutes felt longer than the 7 before them. Elaine kept insisting she was fine, even as her words softened and slowed. Michelle paced, trying to decide whether to blame me or be afraid. The children were sent to the living room with a tablet. Ryan kept touching his phone, locking and unlocking it, typing short messages he deleted before sending. I noticed because I had stopped pretending not to notice things. When the paramedics arrived, Ryan became magnificent. That is the word that came to me, even through the fear. Magnificent. The performance of a devoted son. He opened the door before they knocked. He explained that his mother had become lightheaded during dinner. He said she was stubborn about drinking water. He said his wife had medical anxiety because of her job and had maybe panicked. The paramedic, a woman with tired eyes and a calm voice, looked past him toward me. "You're the one who called?" "Yes." "Tell me what you observed." Ryan started to answer for me. "She thought," the paramedic lifted one hand, "I'd like to hear from her." It was such a small thing, a professional boundary, a normal sentence, but after years of Ryan translating me into something easier for his family to dismiss, it felt like someone had opened a window. I described Elaine's symptoms in order. I gave times. I pointed to the clock. I said the change began approximately 7 minutes after soup was served. I did not accuse. I did not embellish. I spoke like I would speak in a lab deviation report. Observed facts, sequence. No speculation beyond what the data allowed. The paramedic listened. Ryan's jaw tightened with every sentence. "Any medications?" she asked Elaine. Elaine, now frightened enough to be honest, shook her head. "No sleep medication," she said, slurring slightly. "Ryan said that, but I don't take any." The room went quiet. Ryan laughed softly. "Mom, you were prescribed something after your dental procedure." "That was last year," Elaine said. Michelle stared at him. There it was again, his second public mistake. Not dramatic, not a confession, but a lie placed into a room where the truth still had witnesses. The paramedic looked at Ryan. "Do you have the medication bottle?" "I'd have to check." "Please do." He did not move. I could feel the shape of his calculation. If he left the room, I might speak. If he stayed, he looked unhelpful. For once, every option cost him something. "I can look," Michelle said too quickly, desperate to be useful to whichever version of the story would survive. Elaine was assessed, questioned, and eventually transported for evaluation because her symptoms did not resolve quickly enough to dismiss. Ryan insisted on riding with her. I said I would follow in my car. He objected, of course. "You're shaken up. I'll drive you." "No," I said. "I'm taking my car." "Bryn, I said no! The paramedic heard it. Michelle heard it. Elaine, half drowsy on the stretcher, heard it too. And something about witnesses made Ryan swallow whatever he wanted to say next. At the hospital, the story tried to become ordinary again. That is what I remember most. Fluorescent lights, clipboards, insurance cards, nurses asking routine questions, Michelle calling relatives in a low voice. Ryan sitting with his elbows on his knees, face in his hands, the portrait of a worried son. If someone had walked by without context, they would have pitied him. I might have, once. I did not sit beside him. I stood near the vending machines and called the only person I trusted who would understand the difference between fear and evidence. Her name was Mara, and she worked with me in quality control. We were not best friends in the dramatic way people say it in stories. We did not share every secret or talk every day, but Mara was steady. She believed in documentation the way some people believe in prayer. When she answered, I said, "I need you to listen and not react until I finish." She went silent. I told her the sequence. Dinner, tablet. Bowl switch, 7 minutes. Elaine's symptoms, Ryan's medication lie, the soup sample in Elaine's refrigerator. I heard her inhale once, slow and sharp. "Bryn," she said carefully, "are you safe right now?" The question almost broke me, not because I did not know the answer, but because no one had asked it yet. Everyone had asked what was wrong with Elaine. Ryan had asked what I did. Michelle had asked why I was making things worse. Mara asked if I was safe. I looked across the waiting area at Ryan. He was watching me between his fingers. "Not completely," I said. "Then do not go home with him. Do you understand me?" "Yes." "Do not tell him everything you know. Do not argue. Do not threaten. Preserve what you have. Make notes now while it's fresh. Times, exact words. Who was present? And Bryn?" "Yes?" "That soup sample needs to be handled properly. You cannot let him near it." I closed my eyes. For the first time that night, my hands shook. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. "I know." "Good. You're going to want to explain because you're a decent person. Don't. Decent explanations are wasted on people trying to survive their own guilt." I almost smiled at that because it sounded exactly like Mara. Then she added softer, "I'm coming to you." "You don't have to." "I know. I'm coming anyway." Ryan stood as soon as I ended the call. "Who was that?" "Work." "Why are you calling work?" "Because I needed to tell someone I won't be in tomorrow." He studied me. "You're not going to work tomorrow?" "No." "Why?" "Because your mother is in the hospital." He stared, trying to find the trap. I had given him a reasonable answer. He hated reasonable answers when they were not his. "You made this happen," he said quietly. We were far enough from Michelle now that no one could hear unless they tried. "Elaine eating soup made this happen?" I asked. His eyes flashed. "Don't play games with me." "I'm not." "You think you're clever." "No." I looked at him then, letting him see nothing but calm. "I think your mother needs a toxicology screen." The words hit him like a slap he could not report. His face went blank. Then he smiled. It was small and awful. "You're going to sound insane." There it was, the sentence beneath all the others, the foundation of his plan. Not just that I would be harmed, that I would not be believed. I thought of every dinner where Elaine called me sensitive, every car ride where Ryan told me I overreacted, every family joke about my job. Every time I swallowed a correction because peace seemed easier than defending myself. He had not built the story in one night. He had been building it around me for years. Bryn is fragile. Bryn is anxious. Bryn reads too much into things. Bryn thinks she knows everything because she works in a lab. Bryn is not reliable. He had been poisoning my credibility long before he touched my soup. Maybe, I said, but I won't sound dead. For 1 second, I thought he might grab me. His hand moved, then stopped. Behind him, Michelle stepped into the hallway. Ryan? He turned instantly, mask restored. Yeah? They're asking for you. He looked back at me once before walking away. It was not a look of love. It was not even hatred. It was assessment. Like I had become a problem he had not budgeted enough time to solve. While he was gone, I opened the Notes app on my phone and wrote everything. Not feelings. Facts. 6:14 p.m., soup served. Approximately 6:16, observed Ryan drop small white tablet into bowl placed before me. Approximately 6:17, child spilled juice. I switched bowls with Elaine. Approximately 6:23, Elaine displayed delayed blink, impaired grip, softened speech. Elaine quote to me, "Bryn, you feeling okay? You look pale." Ryan said Elaine gets lightheaded sometimes. Elaine denied. Ryan suggested sleep medication. Elaine denied current use. I wrote until my thumbs cramped. I wrote because memory is vulnerable when people are determined to rewrite it. I wrote because Ryan's greatest weapon had always been making me explain myself emotionally. I would not give him emotion this time. I would give him a timeline. Mara arrived 40 minutes later wearing jeans, a gray coat, and the expression of a woman ready to ruin someone's lie politely. She hugged me once, hard, then pulled back. "Keys," she said. "What?" "To your car. We're getting the sample before he thinks to." He might already have. Then we document that, too. We left through the side entrance. I texted Michelle that I was getting air. I did not text Ryan. On the drive back to Elaine's house, Mara did not ask me how I felt. That was another mercy. Feelings were waiting somewhere behind a locked door, and if anyone opened it too early, I was afraid I would not be able to close it again. Elaine's house was dark when we arrived, except for the porch light. I still had the spare key because for years, Elaine had treated me like unpaid help whenever she needed someone to water plants, wait for deliveries, or set out serving trays before guests arrived. My hand trembled as I unlocked the door. "You okay?" Mara asked. "No." Good answer. The kitchen smelled faintly of broth and lemon cleaner. Someone had cleared part of the table before leaving, probably Michelle in a panic. The bowls were still near the sink. My chest tightened. For a moment, I was sure the sample would be gone. But when I opened the refrigerator, the glass container was still behind the iced tea. Small, clear, ordinary. A little cup of soup that had become the center of my life. Mara put on gloves from her bag. Of course she had brought gloves. She photographed the container in place before touching it, photographed the refrigerator, the bowl, the sink, the dining table, the clock. Then she looked at me. "You need to decide whether you're ready to involve police now." I stared at the blue bowl near the sink. Elaine's bowl. My bowl. The difference between those two had become the difference between wife and witness. "If I do," I said. Ryan will say I'm unstable. He's already saying that. Elaine will back him. Maybe. Michelle, too. Maybe. Mara sealed the container inside a clean bag, but the sample won't. I looked at her then, and something in me steadied. The sample won't. Evidence had rules. Evidence did not care who Elaine preferred. Evidence did not care that Ryan had dimples when he apologized, or that Michelle knew how to laugh at the right time. Evidence did not care that I had spent years being trained to doubt the shape of my own fear. We took the soup. We took photos. I took the spoon, too, sealed separately, because some instincts are hard to turn off once they wake up. Then, before leaving, I saw a folder on the small desk beside Elaine's kitchen calendar. Ryan's name was on a sticky note attached to the top. I should have walked past it. I know that. I should have left the house with what I had. But the folder was slightly open, and on the visible page were the words, Beneficiary Confirmation. My skin went cold in a different way. Not shock this time. Recognition. The adult paperwork. The questions about insurance. The careful concern about my health. Ryan had not started this at dinner. Dinner was only the part where he expected my body to catch up with a plan already on paper. I did not remove the folder. I photographed the visible page, the desk, the sticky note, the calendar beside it. Mara watched without speaking. Then she said, very quietly, Bryn, we need to go. I nodded. In the car, my phone buzzed. Ryan. Then Ryan again. Then a text. Where are you? Another. Stop making this worse. Another. Mom is asking for you. Then, after 3 minutes of silence, the one that told me he had stopped pretending, at least with me. You have no idea what you're doing. I looked at the message until the screen dimmed. Maybe he was right. Maybe I did not know everything yet. I did not know the compound. I did not know whether Elaine would recover quickly. I did not know how many lies Ryan had prepared before that dinner, or how many people he had already told them to. I did not know whose name was on the rest of that insurance document. I did not know, not yet, about the woman who was 6 months pregnant and waiting for my husband to become free. But I knew enough. I knew Ryan had watched the clock. I knew he had lied about Elaine's medication. I knew he had expected me to weaken in front of witnesses. I knew he had called me insane the moment I protected the evidence. And I knew that somewhere between the blue bowl and the sealed soup sample, I had stopped being the wife he could manage and become the witness he could not afford. Mara did not drive me home that night. She drove me to her apartment, parked in the underground garage, and sat with both hands on the steering wheel for a few seconds after turning off the engine. Neither of us moved. The soup sample was in a sealed cooler bag at my feet. The spoon was sealed separately, and my phone was face down in my lap because Ryan had started calling in patterns. 3 calls, 1 text. 2 calls, silence. Then another text written like a man trying to decide whether he was still pretending to be worried or already preparing to punish me. You need sleep, Mara said. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. I need a lot of things. Sleep is the only one I can force tonight. I looked at the cooler bag. It seemed impossible that something so small could hold so much. A little leftover soup, a spoon, photographs, notes, a timeline. None of it looked like justice. It looked like leftovers from a dinner I wished I had never attended. But I had learned something important by then. Proof does not announce itself dramatically. Sometimes proof sits quietly in a sealed container, while the guilty person screams loud enough for everyone to look at him instead. Mara took my phone before we went upstairs. "I'm not reading anything," she said. "I'm just putting it on Do Not Disturb." "What if the hospital calls?" "Michelle can call me. You gave her my number." "What if Ryan—" "Ryan is why I'm taking the phone." I was too tired to argue. My body had stayed calm for hours by spending everything it had. Now the calm was cracking. In Mara's bathroom, under lights too bright for midnight, I saw myself in the mirror and understood why Elaine had said I looked pale. My face looked emptied out, like someone had scooped the life from behind my skin and left only the outline of a woman trying to stand upright. I washed my hands 3 times. I could still feel Ryan's fingers on my wrist from dinner, 2 gentle fingers pretending to check my pulse while his eyes watched the bowl. That was the detail I could not escape. Not the pill, not Elaine's slurred words, not the hospital hallway. His touch. The intimacy of it. The cruelty of making murder look like care. I slept for maybe 90 minutes. Not all at once. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the white tablet vanish beneath broth. Every time I drifted, I heard Elaine's voice. "Bryn, you feeling okay? You look pale." At 4 a.m, I woke up sitting upright on Mara's couch with my heart punching against my ribs. Mara was at the kitchen table, laptop open, legal pad beside her, hair tied messily at the back of her neck. "You're supposed to be sleeping," I whispered. "And you're supposed to have a husband who doesn't drug soup," she said without looking up. "We're both adjusting." I wrapped the blanket around myself and sat across from her. She had made a chart. Of course she had. Dinner timeline, witnesses, physical evidence, medical evidence, digital evidence, financial motive. "This is not a formal chain of custody," she said, tapping the paper. "But it's better than panic. First thing this morning, you call an attorney, then police. Then you let professionals tell you how they want the sample handled." "What if they don't believe me?" Mara looked at me then, really looked. "Then we make it harder not to." At 7:15, Elaine's hospital record began to become real. Michelle called first. Her voice was rough and frightened, all the smugness scraped away. "Mom's awake," she said. I closed my eyes. Relief came before anything else, which surprised me. I had hated Elaine in small, exhausted ways for years, but I had not wanted her dead. "Good," I said. "That's good." Michelle breathed shakily. "They said there was something in her system." My eyes opened. Mara looked up from across the table. "What something?" I asked. "They won't tell me everything yet. They're running more tests. Ryan is furious. He says you caused this." "How would I cause something in her system?" Silence. That silence was the first honest thing Michelle had ever given me. "I don't know," she said finally. "Bryn, what happened last night?" There was a time when I would have answered that question with my whole heart. I would have explained. I would have defended. I would have tried to make Michelle understand that I was not dramatic, not unstable, not trying to hurt her family. But that woman had almost eaten the soup. So I said, "Tell the doctors everything you saw, exactly. Not what Ryan says it means. What you saw." Michelle's breath trembled. "He said you switched the bowls." My stomach tightened. There it was. He had guessed. Or he had known enough to build around it. Did he say why that would matter? I asked. She did not answer. Michelle. He said you were trying to make Mom sick to prove some insane point. I looked at Mara. Her face went still. Not shocked. Focused. Did he say what made her sick? I asked. No. Then listen to yourself. Michelle was quiet again, this time longer. He knew there was something to blame, I said, before anyone told him what it was. Her voice broke slightly. I have to go. She hung up. I held the phone in my hand long after the call ended. Ryan had moved faster than I hoped, but not cleaner. He was trying to turn the bowl switch into the crime, which meant he had to admit the bowl mattered. He was trying to make me responsible for Elaine's condition, which meant he had to explain why Elaine's bowl contained something dangerous. The story he had prepared for my collapse did not fit his mother's. That was the problem with lies built for one body. They do not always survive when placed in another. By 9 that morning, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, wearing Mara's spare sweater and the same pants from dinner. The lawyer's name was Evelyn Hart, and she had the calm, unsentimental face of someone who had watched too many people confuse marriage with safety. She listened without interrupting. She read my timeline. She looked at the photographs. She asked precise questions. Did Ryan have access to medication? Had he ever encouraged me to take sleep aids? Had I signed insurance documents recently? Had he threatened me? Had he isolated me from friends? Had he described me as anxious to others? Each question felt like someone turning on lights in rooms I had kept dim for years. I don't know if this is attempted murder yet, Evelyn said when I finished, because I am not an investigator and we do not outrun the evidence. But I know this. You do not go home alone. You do not speak to him privately, and you do not let his family define the facts. She helped me make the police report. She contacted the hospital through the proper channel. She advised me on the soup sample. She told me the phrase, preservation of evidence, in a voice so controlled it steadied me. By noon, the world had become paperwork. Statements, copies, timestamps, photographs forwarded, messages saved, screenshots taken. Ryan texted 16 times before Evelyn told me to stop reading them and send them to her. The messages shifted as the hours passed. First concern. Where are you? We need to talk. Then accusation. You hurt my mother. Then pity. You're not well, Bryn. Then threat dressed as worry. If you keep going, I can't protect you from what people will think. I stared at that one for a long time. I can't protect you from what people will think. That was Ryan in one sentence. Not, I didn't do it. Not, I love you. Not, please come home. His fear was never that I was unsafe. His fear was that I would become believable. The preliminary toxicology results came through late that afternoon. Not to me directly at first, but through the channels Evelyn had prepared me for. I remember the way her office sounded when she received the call. The hum of the air conditioner, Mara shifting beside me. My own breath becoming so shallow I had to remind myself to inhale. Evelyn wrote something down, asked 2 clarifying questions, then thanked the person on the other end and set the phone on her desk. She looked at me not with pity, but with gravity. Elaine's screen was positive for a barbiturate class sedative, she said. The room did not spin. I had expected it to. Instead, everything became painfully clear. The edge of Evelyn's desk, the seam on Mara's sleeve, the faint scratch on my left thumbnail from Elaine's kitchen cabinet. Barbiturate. The word sat between us like a door opening onto a room I could never leave again. I pressed my hands together in my lap. Was it enough to kill her? Evelyn did not soften the answer. Potentially dangerous, especially depending on dose, health, and timing. They're still evaluating. But it was not nothing. Not nothing. That phrase nearly undid me, because Ryan had spent years making everything not nothing into nothing. My discomfort was nothing. My suspicion was nothing. His late nights were nothing. His changed passcode was nothing. His questions about insurance were nothing. The pill in my soup was almost nothing, too. A small white circle hidden in broth, but toxicology had given it a name. The report did what my voice had never been allowed to do in that family. It made the truth official enough to scare people. The preserved soup sample matters now, Evelyn said. So do the photographs and the timeline. Police will want to handle the rest. Mara reached under the table and squeezed my hand once. I did not cry. Not then. Crying felt too private for a moment that belonged to evidence. Ryan was contacted that evening. I do not know exactly what was said in the first conversation because I was not there, and I am grateful for that. I know only what came after. Michelle called Mara, not me. Elaine was stable. Ryan had been asked not to interfere with the investigation. Ryan was saying I had switched the bowls. Ryan was saying I had access to chemicals through work. Ryan was saying I had resented Elaine for years. Ryan was saying everything except the one thing an innocent man would have said first. I never put anything in that soup. When Evelyn told me that, she watched my face carefully. This is going to get ugly, she said. It already is. No, she said. That was private ugly. This will be public ugly. She was right. The next 2 days tore open every quiet corner of my marriage. Police took formal statements. Elaine, now frightened and humiliated, admitted she had not taken any sleep aid, had not knowingly ingested anything unusual, and had felt suddenly impaired during dinner. Michelle admitted Ryan had told people I was unstable before anyone had a medical explanation for Elaine's condition. One of the children, in the blunt way children sometimes become accidental witnesses, said Uncle Ryan got mad when Aunt Bryn took Grandma's soup to the kitchen. The soup sample, handled through the process Evelyn coordinated, became part of the evidence review. The spoon, too. The photographs mattered. The timing mattered. Ryan's texts mattered. His medication lie mattered. But the financial documents changed the temperature of the investigation. The folder I had photographed in Elaine's kitchen led Evelyn to ask questions I had been too afraid to form. A policy existed, not the small employer policy I knew about. Not the ordinary spouse benefit people sign and forget. A separate life insurance policy for $1.2 million, with Ryan as beneficiary, updated months earlier under paperwork he had presented to me as responsible planning. My signature was there, but the circumstances around it were suddenly not simple. I remembered the evening clearly after Evelyn showed me the copy. Ryan had brought me tea. He had placed the papers beside my laptop while I was finishing a work report. He had said, "Just the insurance update we talked about. Nothing dramatic." I had skinned. I had trusted. That was the part that made shame rise in my throat. Not because I had done something wrong, but because trusting your husband should not feel stupid after the fact. And yet, betrayal has a way of making every ordinary act look like negligence. Evelyn stopped me when I began to explain. "Bryn," she said, "he used the relationship as the mechanism. That is not your failure. I wanted to believe her. Some days, I still practice believing her. The mistress came from Ryan's phone records and messages, though not in the cinematic way people imagine. There was no lipstick note, no dramatic hotel receipt falling from a jacket. There were contact patterns, deleted threads recovered through the investigation. A woman named Kelsey whose number appeared under a project alias, a rental payment, medical appointment reminders, and then, finally, the sentence that made the motive no longer financial alone. She was 6 months pregnant. 6 months. I sat in Evelyn's office when she told me, and for the first time since dinner, I made a sound I did not recognize. Not a sob exactly, more like my body rejecting the final shape of the truth. 6 months meant Ryan had been building a second life while still coming to Elaine's dinners with his hand on my back. 6 months meant his mother's comments about me eating properly, looking tired, being thin, being overwhelmed had unfolded beside a secret pregnancy he had chosen over my life. 6 months meant divorce had probably looked inconvenient to him, expensive, embarrassing, public. A dead wife, though, especially one already described as anxious and fragile, might have been easier to mourn than to leave. That was the thought that finally made me cry. Not because he loved someone else. By then, love was too small a word for what had happened. I cried because Ryan had not wanted freedom. Freedom would have required honesty. He had wanted a clean exit, with sympathy, money, and no wife left to contradict him. When the arrest came, it did not feel like victory. That may disappoint people who want revenge stories to land like thunder. Mine did not. It landed like a chair pulled out from under a man who thought the room belonged to him. Ryan was charged in connection with the attempted poisoning, and while the exact legal language belonged to prosecutors, what mattered to me was simpler. For the first time, he had to answer questions he could not soften with a smile. He could not squeeze the investigator's knee under the table and ask them to let it go. He could not call the toxicology report sensitive. He could not tell the life insurance policy it was overreacting. He could not tell the messages to Kelsey that they were making a scene. Elaine did not call me after his arrest. Michelle did. I almost did not answer, but Evelyn said I could let it go to voicemail, and curiosity, or maybe the last bruise of family habit, made me listen later. Michelle's voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. "Bryn," she said, then stopped. There was a long breath. "I don't know what to say." I stood in Mara's kitchen, looking out at the rain streaking the window. I thought of every time Michelle had laughed when Elaine cut me down. Every joke about my work. Every smirk when Ryan corrected me. Every moment she had helped build the version of me Ryan planned to use as cover. "Mom keeps saying she doesn't understand how he could do this," Michelle continued. "But I think we all helped him think he could." That was the closest thing to an apology I ever received from Ryan's family. It was not enough. But it was true, and truth had become the only currency I trusted. I did not call her back. The restraining order came before the divorce was final. I remember standing outside the courthouse with Evelyn beside me, the paper in my hand feeling both powerful and terribly thin. A restraining order is not a wall. It does not erase fear. It does not make you stop checking the parking lot or sleeping with your phone charged beside your pillow. But it is a line the world agrees exists. And after years of Ryan moving every line I drew, that mattered. The divorce filings followed. Ryan contested what he could, denied what he could, and performed wounded innocence whenever there was an audience. But his performance had lost its lighting. Documents had changed the room. Toxicology, insurance, messages, medical reports, police statements, photographs, timeline. The blue ceramic bowl, the spoon, the sample. The things he dismissed as details became the structure that held me upright. I moved into a small apartment across town with windows that faced east. The first morning there, I woke before sunrise on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by boxes labeled in Mara's handwriting because mine had been too shaky when we packed. For a few seconds, I did not know where I was. Then I remembered. No Ryan breathing beside me. No phone buzzing with corrections. No Elaine dinner waiting at the end of the week like a sentence. Just a bare room, pale light, and my own body alive inside it. I walked into the kitchen and made soup. That sounds strange, I know. People expected me to avoid it forever. Maybe part of me expected that too. But fear has a way of claiming ordinary things, and I was tired of surrendering. I made chicken soup, badly, because I am better at analysis than cooking. Too much celery, not enough salt, noodles too soft. I poured it into a plain white bowl, sat at the tiny table by the window, and stared at it until the steam faded. Then I ate one spoonful, then another. I cried after the third, quietly, with one hand over my mouth. Not because the soup tasted good, but because it was mine. No one had touched it. No one had watched the clock. No one had decided what my body was worth. Months passed in paperwork, statements, hearings, and the slow, unglamorous labor of becoming safe. People asked why I had stayed so calm. Some asked with admiration. Some with suspicion, because even after everything, a calm woman frightens people if they expect victims to look broken in familiar ways. The answer was not that I was fearless. I was terrified. I was terrified at the table, terrified in the kitchen, terrified in the hospital hallway, terrified when Ryan smiled and said I would sound insane. But fear and panic are not the same thing. Panic is what Ryan wanted from me. Fear was what kept me alive. I think often about Elaine's question. Bryn, you feeling okay? You look pale. At the time, she thought she was helping Ryan frame me. Maybe she did not know how far he had gone. Maybe she knew only enough to be useful and not enough to be guilty in the way he was. I have stopped trying to solve Elaine. Some people become mysteries because they refuse to look honestly at themselves. What I know is this. I was pale because my marriage had just revealed its true face. I was pale because my body understood danger before the room did. I was pale because the man touching my wrist was waiting for my pulse to betray me. But I was not weak. I was watching. I was counting. I was preserving. Ryan thought silence meant I had no defense. Elaine thought softness meant I had no spine. Michelle thought quiet meant I had no story of my own. They were all wrong. My silence was not surrender. It was the space where I kept the truth safe until it could survive without my permission. The last time I saw Ryan in person, he did not look like the man from the wedding photos. He looked smaller, not because guilt had humbled him, but because consequences had finally removed the audience he knew how to charm. He tried to look at me once across the room, tried to find the version of me who would lower her eyes, who would feel guilty for making things uncomfortable, who would mistake his pain for responsibility. I did not look away. I did not smile. I did not cry. I just held his gaze until he looked down first. That was enough. Not forgiveness, not revenge, just enough. There are people who will tell you that closure comes from understanding why someone hurt you. I do not believe that anymore. Understanding can become another room you trap yourself in, walking around the same question until your feet ache. Why did he do it? Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't I see it sooner? Why did his family help him shrink me until he thought no one would believe me? Some questions do not open doors. They only keep you standing in front of the wreckage. My closure did not come from Ryan explaining himself. It came from signing the final divorce document and realizing his name no longer had legal access to my future. It came from the restraining order. It came from the charges. It came from Mara sitting beside me in court with a granola bar in her purse because she knew I would forget to eat. It came from the first Sunday evening I spent alone, reading on my couch while my phone stayed silent. It came from learning that peace is not the same as being chosen. Sometimes, peace is what begins after you stop auditioning for people who benefited from your doubt. I still work in biochemistry. I still believe evidence matters. But I understand something now that no lab ever taught me. Some toxins do not enter through food. Some enter through repetition. You are too sensitive. You're overthinking. Don't make a scene. You always need to be right. No one else sees it that way. Tiny doses, delivered over years, until you start questioning your own senses before anyone else has to. Ryan put a pill in my soup one Sunday night, but long before that, he had been trying to sedate my trust in myself. That is the part I tell women when they ask how I knew. I did not know all at once. I noticed. I noticed the clock. I noticed the hand. I noticed the lie about medication. I noticed the way concern arrived before symptoms. I noticed because some part of me had never fully gone to sleep, no matter how hard they tried to make me doubt her. So if you are asking what I would do differently, the answer is not that I would shout sooner. Shouting would have helped Ryan. I would not confront him at the table. I would not beg Elaine to believe me. I would not waste one breath trying to make Michelle respect me before the evidence did. I would switch the bowl. I would save the sample. I would call for help. I would write down the time. I would let the documents speak. And when someone smiled across the table and asked why I looked pale, I would remember that sometimes your body knows the truth before your heart is ready to survive it. The night Ryan tried to make me disappear, he forgot one thing. I was never just his quiet wife. I was the witness. And 7 minutes after my soup, the truth came out.